I'm here with my friend Ryan Ogden today. Ryan is a fellow Texan. He and I became good friends just by talking about systems and businesses and getting things together. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Before we go too far into that, I know you talked about the different terminologies, right? You got the systems, process, SOPs. Do you want to just kind of touch on what the difference is between those three things?
Yeah, sure. So I think just to use the term broadly, a system, it's funny, whenever I talk to people, I just ask them, do you have a system, or are you familiar with systems in your business? And I'll ask them, well, what is that to you? And the conversations just go all over the place. So what's fascinating to me is everybody seems to have a sense in their own mind of what a system is, and everybody defines it differently. Yeah. So that tells me that there's a lot of confusion out there. So, for example, some people will say something like, SOPs, standard operating procedures. If you have those, then you have a system. And I guess at this point, I'm somewhat playing devil's advocate because I feel like I have perspective on it after having a lot of these conversations. But I try to just stay curious. I try to not I have the answer and I'm waiting for them to give me the wrong answer so I can tell them the right answer. But I ask, like, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And they say, oh yeah, actually you're right. Yes, that would all be a system also. So. For example, what about forms and templates? If you have those in place, is that a further systematized business? And obviously, the more I bring that up, the more they, either I hadn't thought of that, or yes, of course, those things too. But a lot of times, a thing off the top of their head is something like standard operating procedures, or it might be training, might be onboarding, those kinds of things. In some cases, it might be like automations or workflows or things. It's all automated. I want AI to do it all. That's what I think of as systematized. And by my definition, I would say it's all of those things.
Gotcha.
And so a systematized business probably has a lot of those things evident in their business.
Yeah. Okay, so systems is all-encompassing, SOPs, manuals, whatever you want to call it. It's all a system, essentially.
Yeah, and there are some systems out there that are really focused, like you may have heard of operating systems. You have like the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. I mean, that is a system. Sure. And one of the things, by the way, what it says is to go document your business, to go create SOPs. Right. It just doesn't say how, and it doesn't say it doesn't really list all those things. It has a process. There are some. I know a lot of people are really into EOS and have a really deeply into it, and so I don't mean to speak. I'm not actually speaking negatively about EOS. Sure. It actually does a lot of good. I know you're familiar with it too.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
But when you get to like the how do you capture the ways that your business operates? Right. It doesn't get very specific in those areas.
Right. There's the E-Myth. There's a book called Built to Sell. There's EOS. All these books point you in the direction of you need to document and systemize it, but it doesn't say how you do it. Right. And you get kind of lost.
And that's really what compelled me to write Momentum, because I realized as we were doing this more and more for businesses in every industry and all sizes, that there were patterns that were coming up, and there were ways that we did things to we realized that without a methodology, it's easy to get wrapped around and act so quickly, because it starts off seeming simple. Right. Maybe like the example you were giving where you're offloading a certain task. Tasks are easy to offload. But then you enter into some areas of complexity in your business, and people just, we've seen it, and so the methodology helps them navigate, the complexities.
Exactly, yeah. You speak about this concept of the blob. So tell us what the blob is before I go to my next question.
Sure, the blob, or the dreaded blob, is just kind of my, kind of poking fun at the way a lot of times what I would call complexity comes out of people's heads. Yeah. So there are three main ways that we receive the inputs to capture, like, what is your business system. Let's assume you have a way of doing something and you just haven't captured it yet. You haven't either documented it or videoed it or whatever. The way to capture that are usually three main ways, which is interviews, observations, or existing artifacts. If you have any documents or anything already, even if they're out of date, those are usually helpful. But the first two are the most common, either interviews or observation. And so if you're interviewing somebody, a lot of times they just start brain dumping, like we've all either received that or we've done it ourselves. And I'd say that blob, that brain dump that comes out is what we call the blob, and that's kind of evidence of complexity. If I can't say to you, oh, I do this, and then I do this, and then I do that, then I probably am not clear in my own mind,
Exactly.
and that will come out as a blob.
Right.
So that's what we call that.
Got it. And I've seen that so many times. When I talk to other contractors, they just like, well, this is just how I do it, right? They can't explain step by step. But if they want to get to that point, what would be the first step or the best method for someone like that to get started into systemizing their business?
Yeah, and there's so much in the book, and I tried to make it all really practical. So there are I feel like a lot of little bite-sized pieces that you can take and run with. And so there are actually several that I could point to. I guess the one that comes to mind, since we were just talking about capturing inputs, there's more to systematizing than just capturing, but let's just focus there for a minute. So if you're just trying to capture, like, what is it we do? What is our standard? One of the most effective, efficient ways we've discovered to do that is by one question, which we call the good question.
Okay.
And the good question is super simple. The way you word it is really important, and it is simply, what does good look like?
Okay.
And so if you either interview somebody, or if you're the one, let's say behind a camera or whatever, when someone's being observed, or if they're recording what they're doing,
right.
if you try to answer the question, what does good look like? Most often you're going to get a pretty good input. That's a great prompt. We talk about in the AI world of giving good prompts. Well, humans need good prompts too.
Yeah.
And so if you prompt someone with like, what does good look like, and you really dig into that, and obviously you can have some follow-up questions like, well, if that's what good looks like, then what does bad look like? Or when is that most important? Or, you can do some follow-up there.
Yeah.
But that single question will, depending on who you're interviewing, can give you everything. You might literally only need to answer or ask that one question.
Okay.
And then some people who give you one-word answers, you might have to dig a little more, but you can start there.
Exactly. You probably get that a lot in the trades where you just get that one-word answer, yes, no, whatever.
Yeah, and by the way, just real quick, the reason why that's important is because I think a lot of times people are focused on all kinds of different things, and maybe exception cases, edge cases, things that aren't necessarily all that important. Or they might describe all the how of what you do, but they don't say, but hey, listen, if you touch that, the whole thing blows up. Don't touch that, and so they'll leave out really critical details. So if you focus in on what does good look like, you're more likely to get the most important knowledge transfer that you want to hand to someone else, so they can not just do the job, but do it well. Yeah.
Would you recommend when they get started, do they do videos? Do they start writing this down, like flowcharts? What do you think is the best way? Is it just based on what they feel like is best for them, or what's your recommendation?
Yeah. Well, let me start with another little bite-sized piece. In fact, I'm not even sure this is in the book yet, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think this is an edit I might be making to the book, but it's the mantra, which is be scrappy, not crappy. Okay. And I think especially with startups, and especially with small businesses, and especially when we're systematizing our business, we have to remember that whatever we create is not getting graded by someone.
Right.
Okay, unless you're in an audited environment, that's a whole different scenario.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're not, most of this, what we're talking about, we work with clients that are in an audited environment, and they still systematize their business doing what we're talking about right now.
Right.
That's not audited. In other words, they say, hey, these are our audited SOPs that are over here up for inspection.
Right.
But this is how we train our people, and this is how we're going to systematize. This is what we really care about.
The
auditing stuff usually is just a checkbox that they have to do for compliance reasons.
Right.
But it doesn't actually help them run their business.
Yeah.
So in the unaudited environment, no one's grading it. Just make it effective.
Yeah.
And that's really important. So it doesn't have to be all polished and perfect. So in the spirit of that, actually, just at lunch, I was just talking with somebody who said they really want to record some videos to just explain how their team needs to fill out a form that they use internally.
Yeah.
Because they're having problems, they're not completing it correctly.
Right.
And so I challenged them, and I said, give yourself 48 hours, and there's no reason why you can't complete that video in 48 hours. Whether you do it personally or you delegate it, but get it done.
Right.
You're talking about a 1-minute video. You could have had it done during the time it took us to talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is probably the biggest advice I would give people, is just get moving.
Mm-hmm.
And then very quickly, a fast follower, you're going to need to get organized.
Yeah.
And some people will say, well, I want to get organized first. And that's okay. Just make sure you have an expert who knows the end game, who can get you through a whole systematizing of your business. Because if you wait, you're going to end up in analysis paralysis, and you're actually never really going to make.
And I've been there.
By the way, you're reacting, you've lived it.
Yeah, in our company we do have, some SOPs, and they're pretty good. We do revisit them whenever we're like, oh, you know what, this isn't working anymore. We'll go revisit it and then we'll rewrite it, send it out to everyone, make sure we're all understood and trained in it. But every now and then something will pop up where like we don't have an SOP on it, but it's not that important to document it yet. So I'm going to make a video. And after I make this video, I'm going to send it to Elsa, and this is Elsa's job now. So I say, hey, from now on, whenever we have to do this, just watch that video, and that's how you do it until we actually have that SOP in place.
I love that. So that's exactly what I mean by scrappy, not crappy, and that's exactly the kind of stuff that we recommend.
Yeah.
I mean, we do things for clients sometimes where we'll create placeholder content with our, it might be my face on a video that really should not be coming from me. It should be them explaining it, but either because they have some shyness toward the camera,
right,
or they're just too busy or whatever.
Right.
They take our video, and then that. I wish it didn't last that long, but it ends up lasting maybe months until they finally re-record it because their process has changed, or they finally got to.
Right.
And the moral of that story is, and maybe you remember how long that in that example, your temporary content lasted. However long that temporary content lasts until you finally replace it, think the moral of that story is you would have had nothing. During that whole time.
Exactly.
So even though you might cringe a little bit, and you might think, oh, that's not really as good as I need it to be, or push it out, get it out quickly, and think, and because you're really in a continuous improvement.
Yep.
That's the key term that everyone should, when they think about systematization, it's a continuous improvement mindset. So it's got to be. So if you're going to be changing it all the time because you just changed your business or you just thought of something that you don't want it to be perfect, because then you're not going to want to change it. Constantly keep it updated, keep it good enough, okay, don't make it perfect.
It's never going to be perfect. We tried the perfect thing and it doesn't work that well. It just never gets finalized. So it's good enough. It's 80% there. Let's push it out. This is what we're doing. And if things change as time goes on, we'll just tweak it as we go, and it'll get better when we do.
Absolutely.
One thing that I know, I have this problem myself, and I know a lot of other people have it, but they have someone on their team who's a key player. And so if I lost this particular person, crap, what am I going to do, right? So explain how systemizing your business will, would it eliminate that key player fear that you're going to lose that person, or is it just going to minimize it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, if you do it well, I would say that it should eliminate the fear. I think there are a couple of questions maybe inside of that question. So, or things that people come across sometimes. They come across, maybe some of those key players have some defensiveness. They feel like, wait, are you trying to replace me?
Exactly.
So some people want to guard. They feel like that's their value, and if they create transparency and show you how to do their job, then they're somehow losing their value. Yeah. So I think one of the best ways I've seen to address that is to just say, look, the reason we're documenting this is because I want you to grow, especially in a high growth environment. You're wanting your best people to grow with the organization. And so you're wanting to offload. You're essentially saying the best way for you to grow is to have your successor and either already in place in-house, or you have your job documented so we can bring someone in to take your old job so you can move on to your new job.
So what you're saying, the approach should not be, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, we can still run the business.
Yeah, I mean, people will say that eventually anyway.
I've heard that before.
I would not lead
I may have said that myself too.
It happens. I think if you do say that, there should, and every culture is different, and whatever works in your culture, I've learned to be okay with. In my culture, and what I do is, I say, look, it's not about there is a responsibility that we have to the business that here, actually, my business partner and I just had this conversation, and because we were kind of challenged on why do we value being responsive? What is it about our culture that we expect a quick response? And we hadn't even really thought about it until we were working with someone who wasn't as responsive, and it just came up as a conversation. And we realized we had this shared value. We really want to be responsive. And the reason is because I know that you're depending on me and I'm depending on you. And so if I'm not responsive to you, I'm letting you down. I'm causing you to fail in some ways. And so that's a high value in our culture. So we would position it that way within our culture, right? Look, we all need you to grow. We need you to not hang on to these tasks. You, in order to grow, need to let go of these tasks. And so help yourself, help us all, and offload that stuff.
It was funny. A couple of years ago, I was looking to hire someone to help with our operations, being like an operations assistant. And my operations manager, she said, well, I kind of like doing all these things, and I don't know if I want to get rid of them. I said, well, either we can interview for your assistant or we can interview for your boss. Which one do you want? So we got her an assistant.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's exactly the kind of conversations we have. Look, this is, and the way I've said, I think basically the same thing is, this is what the organization needs. The organization needs someone, like you said, your boss. The organization needs this role.
Right.
And so it's decision time.
Exactly.
Do you want that role? I think you can grow into that role, and that's what my motives are. And some people will hang it. Some people will say, no, I don't want that role. And so that's a really healthy conversation to have.
It was a very good conversation, yeah.
What did she choose again? You've told me that story before.
What's that now?
What did she choose in that example?
We got her an assistant. Yeah, and she's a high-level performer in my company. If I take a day off, it's because she's running the company for me. So yeah, it was the right decision. I'm glad she went that way, but I can't force it, right? If she didn't want it, I can't force it. Right?
Yeah, I love the way you framed it. It's a decision. What do you want to do? Because I'm not going to slow down the business, and that's not responsible to everybody else to do that.
Exactly. All right. So I talked about in your book about paradox of expertise. Can you explain what that is?
Nope. It's so funny, you write a book, and it's I guess it's when actors talk about, like, you're kind of remembered for your one movie or something. But honestly, I don't remember that part. So jog my memory. What was it I wrote on that?
It's about pretty much like a seasoned leader would be able to empower other people to do it. I think it was essentially what we were just talking about.
Oh, yes.
With my team member.
Yes. I just need a little memory jogger there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you answered your question, right?
Exactly.
The paradox of expertise is that if you have expertise and you're holding on to it, it gives you the perception that maybe you're more valuable or whatever. But actually, the more transparent you are with that expertise and the more you give it away, the more able you are to grow. It's actually like an anchor on you. I don't remember what my exact wording was in the book.
So I experienced that myself. I mean, I still struggle with it too, where things I still hold on to. My executive assistant often reminds me to get out of my email, stop messing with my calendar, things like that. And those are the things I should not be doing. Yet I still fall into bad habits sometimes, So I still struggle with that, but I'm getting better. But I know I've grown over the last 5 years to where I can come here for a week, and we're still running 5 projects in 2 different states, right? It's working. I just have to grow. I have to do a better job, right? So I have to have that self-awareness.
Yeah, that's great.
So I can continue growing. The company won't outgrow me. But so momentum will builds when you systemize your business. What if you're in crisis mode? You're closing out jobs. You're trying to bring in more jobs. Right? You're just crisis mode all the time. What is your recommendation to that person who's in crisis mode on, okay, I need to start right now? How do they start?
Yeah, that's great. So, and that's fairly rare, right? And so most people who are in crisis, I'll use a metaphor. If someone's drowning, sometimes even when you throw them a life preserver, they're too distracted to even grab the life preserver.
Yeah, right.
And they're not going to ask for the life preserver necessarily because they're just so consumed in the chaos. So most times no one's going to ask, how do I systematize my business because I'm in chaos? But to answer your question, I would really focus in on systematizing crisis management. I mean, I know that might sound obvious or silly, but especially if you're in crisis a lot, I would start there. I mean, obviously, the less systemizing you have, or systematizing, I use those terms interchangeably, but the less you have, the more likely you are to end up in chaos.
Exactly.
So certainly you could fix the root cause and you'll have less chaos. But I wouldn't start there. I'd start with, how do we crisis manage? So, for example, do we call a crisis? Do we have a crisis management team? Who exactly do we call together in that moment?
Right.
What do we talk about? How long do we talk? What inputs do we need to be effective in that meeting? Do we all come to the table, with nothing? We just kind of run in from the hallway, or if it's onto a Zoom or whatever. Or do we collect things first? Do we, and so you answer those kind of questions. Where do we go from there? Who do we report out to? So there are all kinds of things I would systematize how you manage crisis.
And once you come up with that system, that crisis will less likely show up again.
Yeah, I think in the example, I mean, obviously it would be so. specific to that particular situation, but I would say most likely that's a Band-Aid fix. So you're systematizing the crisis management, but you're not systematizing the crisis production. So I would start systematizing the crisis management rather. How do we manage the crisis? But then the next step would be, now let's go to the root cause. Where are these crises coming from? Do some root cause analysis and then systematize those areas.
I was talking to someone this morning about their construction operations, and he was telling me all these different things he got going on, and it sounds like a lot. It does. And I could tell he was maybe a little overwhelmed. So just tell me what projects you have going on right now. Because what he wanted to do is throw more resources at it. I want to hire 4 more people, and I want to do this, and this. Right? What projects you have going on? Name all the projects. I'm like, okay, just based on what I'm seeing, you can just have that one guy and create a system behind it, get some remote team members to do the back office admin, and you'll be fine. You don't have to throw 4 more people there to do it, because you're going to be chaotic. You're not going to have like roles, job descriptions for them. Just say, just fix it, right? So the knee-jerk reaction is to throw resources at it, more people. But the wise way to do it is just take a step back and say, okay, how can I make this a little bit more organized, and go from there and build. Get the momentum, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, when I've always thought about a business capability, like what does that mean? If a business, an entity is really good at selling or production or, whatever that thing is, what's behind that capability? Yeah. And people process and technology, or people process and tools, or however you want to think of that. And so a lot of times people will focus on a capability is like a 3-stranded muscle. And so however strong a company is in a certain area is, I would say, how strong are the 3 underlying strands of people, process, and the tools or tech. And so if you're relying all on people, then you're probably not as strong as you think you are, because as soon as that person leaves, you now have 0 capability. Yeah, it falls back on that key person problem that we talked about earlier. Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about the technology, what are some good technology or softwares that we could use to help with the whole systemization? Yeah, absolutely. It's a very common question, a lot of interest in this, and it's also going to be dated, as soon as we record this, right? So, but there are a few go-tos, I'm a certified Trainual consultant, and I picked Trainual as a go-to tool. So that's kind of my default in terms of just like, where do you house all this content? And one of the reasons I like that is because it just structures the content. It's a lot. If you're not familiar with it at all, which I know you are, but if you aren't, it's kind of like a website that houses all your stuff. And so the reason why that's a great tool is because you can hyperlink, you can put rich media inside of it, so you can put videos and all that. All of it is inside your, one SOP or whatever. And you can do the transcript and the video all in one place, and now it's all searchable, and each of the words and the text is all searchable and all that. So that's one really good tool. There are other learning management systems, or LMSs, like Trainual, that we've used as well, and so it doesn't have to only be that. And if you have 0 budget, or you're really budget conscious, even just using like a Google Suite or something like that, can work. Right. So that would be a starting place of just kind of, where do I house it all? Loom is really effective for. Loom's great. It's perfect. For just like quick screen sharing, screen recordings, any kind of how-to that you're doing that's in a computer. I do this and then I do that, and clicking and showing. It's great to record it and then narrate it as you're recording it. Especially if you can answer the question again of, what does good look like? Exactly. Loom and other tools like Loom. That's just kind of one of the most popular. AI, ChatGPT and the others that are out there are great for generative text, especially. And what they'll also do, like, we could take the transcript from this podcast, and then we could pull out a bunch of SOP. It'll actually it'll convert our conversation into how-to instructions. So how it could like summarize our whole, how do you create a SOPs or whatever based on our conversation. So that's good. I feel like there's one more I'm not thinking of, but just off the top of my head. That's all I can think of, All right, Ryan, so if somebody is like, hey, you know what, I want to get this going. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I need some help. Is this a service that you offer? If so, how can they contact you? Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, thanks for asking. So Momentum is both the name of the book and the name of the company. So
okay,
yeah,
good.
Momentum Method is actually the full name of the company. And our URL is builtonmomentum.com.
Wow.
So if you go to builtonmomentum.com, there are some resources there. And we just really believe, and you're probably going to fall somewhere on the spectrum of you're more of a do-it-yourselfer, or you just want somebody to come in and do it for you. And we want to serve you anywhere on that spectrum.
Awesome.
So if you're on the DIY, there are resources there. There's the book. And then kind of as you move up, there are courses. There's a certification program. You know, if you want to kind of learn our methodology but keep it in house, and and then anywhere along the way, right? Maybe we'll come and get a project kicked off for you and pass the baton or whatever that is.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Hey, thanks for your time today, and I appreciate it. Look forward to doing more collaboration with you.
Hey, thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Ryan.